Okay, so picture this. 1 week. Just 7 days after my divorce was finalized, after years of a marriage that felt like a slow, agonizing death, my ex-wife, Sarah, tied the knot again. And not just with anyone, but with the man she'd been raving about for months, her perfect man, the one who apparently possessed everything I lacked. But here's the kicker, the part that still sends a shiver down my spine every time I think about it. I recognized him. Not from a casual encounter, not from some distant memory, but from a place so deeply buried in my past, a place full of pain and betrayal, that seeing his face again felt like a punch to the gut. Tell me, if you were in my shoes, if you saw the man who utterly destroyed your family's life standing there, marrying your ex-wife, would you have said something? Would you have just let it slide, or would you have torn their carefully constructed world apart? I need to know, because I still grapple with it every single day. Let's go back to the beginning, to a time when Sarah and I were just two kids in love, full of dreams and the kind of naive optimism that only youth can provide. We met in college, in a ridiculously cliched meet cute during a campus cleanup event. She was covered in mud, laughing, and I was instantly smitten. We dated for 5 years before getting married, building a life together brick by painstaking brick. We bought a small house, adopted a goofy golden retriever named Buddy, and for a while it felt like we had everything figured out. Our biggest arguments were over who left the dishes in the sink or what movie to watch on a Friday night. Life was simple, comfortable, and I genuinely believed we'd grow old together, sipping tea on our porch, reminiscing about the good old days. But then slowly, almost imperceptibly, things started to shift. It began with little things. Sarah started working longer hours, always citing a big project or an important deadline. She became more distant, less interested in our shared hobbies. Our conversations grew shorter, more superficial. I tried to bridge the gap to understand what was happening, but she just brushed me off, saying I was being overly sensitive, that work was just stressful. I believed her because I loved her and because the alternative, that she was intentionally pulling away, was too painful to contemplate. I was a software engineer, working long hours myself, and I often told myself it was just the grind of modern life affecting us both. We were both tired, stretched thin, and just needed to push through this phase. Then came the perfect man narrative. It started subtly, almost innocuously. My new colleague, Mark, he's just so efficient, she'd say over dinner, completely out of the blue. He really knows how to get things done. I'd nod, feigning interest, thinking nothing of it. Then it escalated. Mark gave me some great advice on that presentation. He's such a visionary. Or, Mark and I stayed late brainstorming. He just understands my ideas so well. Each mention was like a tiny pinprick, small at first, but cumulatively they started to sting. I tried to ask about him, about this seemingly omnipresent Mark, but Sarah would get defensive, accusing me of being jealous or insecure. She'd say, "Can't I just have a male colleague without you making it weird?" And so I'd back down, feeling foolish, feeling like I was the one creating problems where there were none. But my gut, that persistent, nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach, wouldn't let it go. Sarah started dressing differently, spending more time on her appearance before work. She'd always been beautiful, but now there was a new kind of sparkle in her eyes, a certain energy that hadn't been there in years. It wasn't for me, though. Our intimacy dwindled to almost nothing, and when I tried to initiate, she'd always have an excuse. Headache, tired, too much on her mind. The excuses became a pattern, a predictable rhythm of rejection that chipped away at my self-esteem. I started to feel like a ghost in my own home, invisible, irrelevant. One evening, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I confronted her calmly at first, then with a rising sense of desperation. I laid out all my observations, all my fears. I told her I felt like she was slipping away, that something was fundamentally wrong. She listened, her face unreadable, and then, with a sigh, she finally admitted it. "I've met someone," she said, her voice flat, devoid of any real emotion. "And I want a divorce." The words hit me like a physical blow. The air left my lungs and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. All those little pinpricks, all those nagging doubts coalesced into one undeniable, crushing truth. It wasn't just a colleague, it was an affair. It was betrayal. I asked who it was, hopping, praying it was Mark, but deep down I already knew. "It's Mark," she confirmed, avoiding my gaze. "He makes me feel alive again. He understands me in a way you never did." That last part cut deeper than anything. You never did. Years of building, years of loving, years of sacrificing, all reduced to that one dismissive sentence. The divorce was brutal. Not in terms of legal battles, thankfully, as we didn't have much to fight over, just the house and Buddy, who I insisted on keeping. It was brutal because of the emotional wreckage. Sarah, seemingly unfazed, just wanted to move on, to start her new life with Mark. I, on the other hand, was left to pick up the pieces of mine. I grieved the loss of my marriage, the loss of the future I'd envisioned, and the loss of the person I thought Sarah was. I spent countless nights staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every conversation, searching for clues I'd missed, for something I could have done differently. My friends tried to help, but their words of comfort often felt hollow. "You'll get through this," they'd say. "You're better off without her." But in the throes of it, all I felt was an overwhelming sense of failure and emptiness. Months passed. The divorce was finalized, a cold legal document that officially severed our ties. I tried to focus on my work, on my hobbies, on anything that would distract me from the gnawing pain. I even started therapy, trying to process the trauma and rebuild my shattered self-worth. Sarah, meanwhile, was living her best life, or so it seemed from her carefully curated social media posts. Photos of her and Mark, smiling, laughing, traveling to exotic locations. Each picture was another twist of the knife, a reminder of what I had lost and what she had gained. I eventually blocked her, deciding that active avoidance was better than passive torment. Then came the wedding invitation. Not from Sarah directly, but from a mutual friend who, bless her heart, clearly hadn't gotten the memo about my desire for complete detachment. It was a formal, elegant card, announcing the upcoming nuptials of Sarah and Mark. My first instinct was to tear it up, to burn it, to pretend it never existed. But some perverse curiosity made me look at it more closely. I saw the date, exactly 1 week after our divorce was finalized, and a bitter laugh escaped me. She hadn't wasted a single second. And then I saw the photograph. A pre-wedding shot of Sarah and Mark, radiant, happy, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. And that's when it hit me, like a lightning bolt, a cold, dreadful recognition that went beyond the initial shock of seeing them together. My eyes fixated on Mark's face, really looked at him, and a memory, buried deep under layers of trauma and time, clawed its way to the surface. It wasn't just a memory, it was a scar. A raw, festering wound I thought had long since healed. This wasn't just Sarah's perfect man. This was him. The man who, years ago, had orchestrated a devastating fraud that had cost my family everything. Let me take you back even further now, to when I was just a teenager. My father, a kind, hardworking man, had invested his life savings and a substantial portion of my grandfather's inheritance into a promising tech startup. He was a believer, an optimist, always looking for the next big thing. The company was fronted by a charismatic CEO, a man who spun tales of innovation, of revolutionizing the industry, of guaranteed returns. My father was captivated, as were many others in our community. We were a close-knit town, and trust was a given. This CEO, this smooth-talking charlatan, became a fixture in our lives, often at community events, always with a smile, always with a reassuring word about the company's progress. The company's name was Future Horizons, and its CEO was a man named David Miller. He had a way of making you feel like you were part of something bigger, something truly special. He'd talk about empowering local communities, about creating jobs, about ethical business practices. My father, with his honest heart, bought into it hook, line, and sinker. He even encouraged other family friends to invest, genuinely believing he was helping them secure their financial futures. But Future Horizons was a sham, a meticulously constructed Ponzi scheme. The revolutionary technology was smoke and mirrors, the profits non-existent, and the entire operation was designed to funnel money from new investors to pay off older ones, all while the CEO enriched himself. When the bubble burst, It wasn't just a financial setback. It was an earthquake that shattered our lives. My father lost everything. Not just his savings, but his retirement, his dreams, his sense of security. The shame and guilt he felt for having led others to invest too were almost unbearable. Our family, once comfortable, was plunged into financial ruin. We lost our home, my parents had to sell cherished heirlooms, and my father, once a vibrant, optimistic man, became a shadow of his former self. He never fully recovered, and the stress and heartbreak contributed to health issues that ultimately shortened his life. He passed away a few years later, a broken man, haunted by the specter of future horizons. The CEO, David Miller, was arrested, tried, and eventually served a few years in prison. But to me and to my family, that felt like a slap on the wrist for the devastation he had caused. He had ruined lives, shattered families, and stolen futures. I remembered his face from news reports, from court proceedings, from the sheer terror of that period. The sharp features, the deceptive smile, the eyes that held no remorse. And now, looking at the wedding invitation, looking at Mark's face, there was no doubt. The hairline was a little different, maybe a few more lines around the eyes, but it was him, David Miller, the man who had destroyed my family, now going by Mark, marrying my ex-wife Sarah. My blood ran cold. The grief and anger over Sarah's betrayal, which I thought had started to subside, now mixed with a potent cocktail of old, festering rage. It wasn't just a wedding anymore. It was a grotesque mockery, a cosmic joke played at my expense. How could Sarah, the woman I had loved, be marrying him? Did she know? Was she complicit? Or was she just another one of his marks, another victim in his elaborate scheme to rebuild his life, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake? The questions swirled in my mind, a chaotic storm of disbelief and fury. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Here I was, staring at the face of the man who ruined my family, marrying the woman who ruined my marriage. Everything was converging into this one unbearable point. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have gone to the wedding? Would you have confronted him privately? Would you have gone to the authorities? Or would you have simply let it go, believing that some battles are not worth fighting, even if they burn you from the inside? I genuinely want to know, because I was utterly torn, consumed by a need for justice, but also by a fear of stirring up old wounds. I spent the next few days in a daze, oscillating between an intense urge for revenge and a paralyzing fear of the consequences. I researched David Miller, or Mark, as he now called himself. He had indeed served time for fraud, changed his name upon release, and had apparently built a new life, completely erasing his past. He was working as a financial consultant, a sick twist of irony that made my stomach churn. Sarah, undoubtedly, knew nothing of his true identity. She had been swept up in his charm, his carefully constructed persona of success and sophistication, just like my father had been all those years ago. I considered my options. I could call the police, but for what? He had served his time, and while his new identity might be legally questionable, proving malicious intent or a new crime would be difficult. I could contact Sarah, warn her, expose him. But what would that achieve? Would she believe me? Or would she see it as a desperate attempt by a jilted ex-husband to ruin her happiness? The thought of her defending him, of her choosing him over the truth, was almost as painful as the initial betrayal. Then I thought about my father. I thought about the quiet dignity with which he faced his ruin, the pain he carried in his eyes, the years of struggle that followed. I thought about the trust that had been violated, the lives that had been irrevocably altered. And in that moment, something inside me clicked. This wasn't just about me and Sarah anymore. This was about justice for my family, for my father, and for all the innocent people David Miller had conned. He had successfully erased his past, but he hadn't erased the pain he caused, and I was not going to let him get away with it again. I decided I would go to the wedding, not to cause a scene, not to shout accusations, but to gather evidence, to confirm my suspicions, and to deliver the truth in a way that would leave no doubt. I contacted a private investigator, a former police detective I knew through a friend. I explained the situation, the history, the current revelation. He agreed to discreetly attend the wedding as a guest, armed with a hidden camera to observe Mark and to gather any information that might link him back to David Miller. He also advised me to bring a few select documents, old newspaper clippings about the Future Horizons scandal, court documents detailing Miller's conviction, and a photograph of Miller from that time. These would be my weapons, my undeniable proof. The day of the wedding arrived, cloaked in a surreal sense of dread and determination. I dressed in a suit, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. The venue was a beautiful, sprawling estate, perfect for a fairy tale wedding. Sarah looked radiant, glowing in her white dress, completely oblivious to the impending storm. Mark, or David Miller, stood beside her, his practiced smile plastered on his face, greeting guests with an air of charm and confidence. He looked every bit the successful, respectable man Sarah believed him to be. I watched from a distance, observing his mannerisms, his laugh, the way he interacted with Sarah's family. It was him, unequivocally. The chilling recognition only intensified my resolve. My private investigator, disguised as a distant relative, was already there, discreetly moving through the crowd, capturing footage. During the reception, as the speeches began, I knew it was my moment. The investigator had slipped me a small earpiece, and through it he gave me a signal. He's about to make his speech. David Miller stepped up to the microphone, radiating an almost sickening charisma. He spoke of his love for Sarah, his excitement for their future, his gratitude for a second chance at happiness. Each word felt like a lie, a carefully constructed facade designed to deceive. As he finished and the applause began, I walked purposefully towards the microphone. The room quieted, a murmur spreading through the crowd as people recognized me, Sarah's ex-husband. Sarah's face, initially confused, twisted into a mask of horror and fury. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, stepping towards me, but I ignored her. I took the microphone from a bewildered usher, my voice calm, steady, despite the hurricane raging inside me. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my gaze locked on David Miller's face. His eyes, which had initially held a flicker of surprise, now narrowed with dawning recognition and fear. "I apologize for interrupting this joyous occasion, but there's something everyone here needs to know, especially Sarah." I paused, letting the tension build, the whispers growing louder. Sarah was now trying to pull me away, but I stood my ground. "Sarah, you know this man as Mark," I continued, gesturing towards him. "But that is not his real name." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Sarah froze, her hand still on my arm, her eyes wide with confusion. David Miller, his face now pale, tried to interject. "What is he talking about? This is absurd." "It's not absurd, David Miller," I said, using his real name, letting it hang in the air like a thunderclap. "It's the truth." I pulled out the stack of documents I had brought. "For those of you who don't know, years ago, a man named David Miller orchestrated one of the largest financial frauds in our state's history. He ran a Ponzi scheme called Future Horizons, which robbed countless innocent people of their life savings. My own father was one of his victims. He lost everything, and it ultimately destroyed him." I held up a faded newspaper clipping with David Miller's mugshot clearly visible. "This is David Miller, and this," I said, pointing to the man standing next to Sarah, "is the same man." The ballroom erupted. Shouts, gasps, confused murmurs. Sarah looked from me to David, her face contorted in disbelief, then back to the newspaper clipping. David Miller was now visibly shaken, his fake smile completely gone, replaced by an expression of pure panic. "He's lying. He's a jealous ex trying to ruin my life," he yelled, his voice cracking. "Am I?" I challenged, my voice rising above the din. "Ask him about Future Horizons. Ask him why he changed his name. Ask him why he never mentioned his prison sentence for fraud." I looked directly at Sarah, whose face was now etched with a mixture of horror and betrayal. "Sarah, this man preyed on people's trust, he destroyed families, and he went to prison for it. He is a con artist, and he has been lying to you, just as he lied to everyone else." Before anyone else could react, David Miller, seeing his carefully constructed world crumbling around him, made a dash for the exit. But my private investigator, who had anticipated this, subtly blocked his path, allowing others to quickly surround him, preventing his escape. The police, whom the investigator had discreetly alerted, arrived moments later. They had been waiting nearby, ready to intervene if necessary, as the investigator had provided them with enough preliminary information to consider Mark's identity a matter of interest. The scene that followed was chaotic. David Miller was apprehended, sputtering denials and threats. Sarah was in shock, tears streaming down her face, staring at the man she was about to marry with an expression of profound agony. Her parents, who had adored Mark, were utterly devastated, their faces pale with disbelief. I didn't stay for the full aftermath. My job was done. I had exposed the truth. I had delivered justice for my father and for all those David Miller had wronged. As I walked out of the opulent ballroom, leaving behind the shattered remnants of a perfect wedding, a strange sense of calm settled over me. The years of pain, the anger, the feeling of powerlessness, they hadn't vanished completely, but a heavy weight had been lifted. In the days and weeks that followed, the story exploded. David Miller's true identity was revealed, and he faced new legal challenges, not just for identity fraud, but also for potential violations of his parole by engaging in financial consulting without disclosing his past. Sarah, humiliated and heartbroken, reached out to me, not with anger but with profound regret. She apologized profusely, acknowledging her naivete and admitting that she had been completely fooled by his charm and his carefully fabricated life. She told me she was disgusted, not just by him, but by herself for not seeing it, for not listening to her gut feelings, for not truly knowing the man she was about to marry. I accepted her apology, not because I wanted to reconcile, but because I saw a genuine repentance in her voice, a shattered innocence that mirrored my own from years ago. I didn't get back together with her, but we found a way to be civil, to acknowledge the shared trauma, and to move forward separately. The wedding was, of course, called off. David Miller, now stripped of his carefully crafted alias, faced renewed scrutiny and likely more jail time. Justice, in a way, had been served. It wasn't a triumphant victory filled with joy, but a quiet vindication. I had honored my father's memory, and I had prevented another wave of potential victims from falling prey to a skilled predator. Looking back, it was a terrifying and exhilarating experience. The weight of knowing, the burden of deciding what to do, the sheer audacity of confronting a con artist on his wedding day, it all felt like something out of a movie. But it was my life, and I had to live it. I learned that sometimes the past isn't truly past until you confront it, and that sometimes the best way to heal your own wounds is to fight for others who can't fight for themselves. So that's my story. It's messy, it's dramatic, and it's something I still process every single day. If you've ever faced a similar situation where your past and present collide in a truly shocking way, I hope you found some resonance in my experience. Like this video if you were on my side and understood why I did what I did. Subscribe for more stories like this, where real life is stranger than fiction. And please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. I'm eager to hear your perspectives. I'll see you all in the next story.